Thank you to our witnesses. We're going to start questions with Mr. West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Velasquez. I guess as I said, and Mr. Frisbee, go Big Orange. It is football season.
Yes, sir.
All right. We got to beat these Gators this weekend. As I sit here and listen to the testimony, I, in my simple Southern way, it seemed like we're talking about hell, purgatory, and heaven. And, you know, small business owners operate in, it seems, you know, a hell. And we've got to make sure that we prop them up and we protect them and enable them to be successful because, as you say, they are an economic engine. But yet I would think that we have some of these small businesses that do want to graduate maybe out of hell and get to purgatory. But yet in purgatory, they find themselves, you know, kind of left out to hang. And I don't want to see us create this gap where all of a sudden these businesses that have grown become mid-sized businesses and then they fall off the map and then, you know, that creates a new problem. And, of course, heaven represents the big guys. So I guess as my question is to the panel, what do we do to make sure that we continue to protect? We got to get to those right levels of the 23% contracts for small businesses, as you talked about for women-owned businesses. But what do we do to also make sure that we incentivize growth for small businesses to get out of hell, to get into purgatory, and they can stay there, and at least we can have that vibrant, you know, if we wanted to talk about a middle class, but a middle operating range for businesses here in America. So my question is, what do we do to make sure that we are incentivizing, you know, coming out of that small business to get into the medium range business, but then not, you know, taking away from those small businesses?
Could I respond to that?
Any way we want. Of course, you're Tennessee Vols, so you get to go first.
I think that if you look at what we talked about before, you've got 23% for small business and the balance for large business. To create a medium-sized category, to me, in my mind, makes perfect sense. But it needs to be a separate category. It does not need to come out of the 23% that small business set aside. If we were hitting 23% regularly and had done it for a number of years, you wouldn't hear from me because I would say we're accomplishing our objective. But when you haven't hit the 23%, to turn around and take that large business category and let them compete on ours just to make the number makes no sense. And I'll put it into perspective for you. When we talked about 1,500 people, now I don't know the category, but I'm out of the textile and clothing and uniform business. There are 4 large companies that dominate the uniform and textile and clothing business as primes to the Department of Defense. Companies like American Apparel and Proper, for example. At 1,500 people, guess what? They're now small. They just wiped us out. We don't even exist anymore because there's no way I can compete with them.
May I also respond? In all due respect to my esteemed panelists here and to Mr. Frisbee in particular, as Mr. Conley described his bill, H.R. 1812, and as we interpret it, it doesn't take from small business concerns. First of all, what the bill is attempting to do is to allow a growth path or a transition for companies who have already exceeded their NAICS codes. They're no longer considered small, but they're not large enough to compete on the large-scale business with Northrop Grumman and SAIC and others. So what we're looking at is, I think I'm hearing from most of the folks here today, the goal is one issue, and that needs to be addressed. But how do we allow businesses to grow is yet in itself another issue. And this bill is a pilot which simply is designed to protect small business by allowing small business to continue to grow up to 1,500 based on an employee size standard that currently, I believe, falls in telecommunications today. So it's not even a new standard. It's something that it does exist. But now we're utilizing it in this pilot to allow more businesses to grow up to 1,500. They are also required under the pilot to mentor to other small business. Mentoring is important because it allows for that business to gain the necessary infrastructure. What we find in this range of mid-sized companies or larger smalls is that they have added benefit in terms of their accounting systems and infrastructure, and they can reach back to help other small businesses to be able to gain those same types of things to strengthen their infrastructure. And I believe someone mentioned the business breakthrough at GSA. That's aimed at those businesses, by the way, that were small, and they accelerated so quickly. They blew through their NAICS code size standards, but they still operate as a small business and not as a medium-sized business. They don't have the infrastructure in place. And so the Business Breakthrough Program is designed to aid those businesses with needed technical assistance and the types of things that they can't get otherwise because they no longer qualify as a small business. So we're really looking at a growth path. And I recede.
I would say the core issue is the bundling issue, because the contracts have been set aside for small businesses, and then those that are not set aside for small businesses are typically quite large, and a medium-sized business could never attain that. So I believe that we keep the small business set aside for small businesses and then take care of the anti-bundling, remove the bundling as an issue. Then those who do graduate into a larger business but not the super large would have a vehicle to then grow their business.
Ms. Vasquez also hit the nail on the head. I've got 40 years in the defense business. I have seen firsthand the fraud and the manipulation that goes on. When you've got a company that goes out of the small business category, there are a number of them, and I'm not going to name them here, but there are a number that will try to set up businesses under wives, kids, family members, other company names, just to try to get around the small business standards. I've seen factories where orange construction barrier tape was run through the middle of the factory, 200 operators on one side, 200 on the other. And when you push to find out why that's there, they're mentoring another small business on the other side of that construction barrier tape. There's not the enforcement there to even really aggressively go after enforcing the small business standards, and we compete against it all the time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.